Good afternoon, sir.
Sucheta. That's right.
It's Shrestha. I'm
Shrestha.
yeah,
I'm really sorry.
it's
I'm
okay.
really
Actually,
sorry.
I'm
I remembered the S and I knew there was a Su kind of
yeah.
thing in it.
Um, I'm trying to correct the name here. Maybe I can change that. I do that, and then perhaps it won't be such a problem.
Yeah, it becomes easier because in fact, once you see the name on the screen, it's easier to call out the person. Otherwise, it becomes extremely difficult. And on an average, time, I deal with so many students that so many times it becomes confusing. Though I remember names in the course of time. So, how are you all guys doing? Delhi, it's good morning, good afternoon. In fact, it's a wonderful
Hi,
weather in Delhi. NCR. Hi, Swadesh. Good to see you.
hi. Abhas Swadesh is heading one uh, Prabhasi NGO.
Yes, I'm aware. You had
So
told.
he is operating both GCC and Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, all this area.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Okay, sir.
Okay,
Okay, you
so
can start. Yes.
okay, so let me start. Before I start, hang on. Let me put stop my video and share my presentation. So before I start, I wanted to share a couple. I came across this couple of stories. There are three stories on the Tibetan diaspora, one from 2017, one from 19, and one from 21. So let me just share the stories one by one. That's one, that's second, and that's third. So these are the three stories from 17, 19, and 21. Are you able to see the screen and hear my voice?
Raghu.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, in this block one, in fact, this is the last unit of block one. We have talked about citizenship. We talked about state. We didn't really talk about state as a concept. And in this unit, we bring a new term called belonging. And we are going to see kind of the interplay between these three. And then we look at the Tibetan diaspora once more, which we did in the last unit. We look at it once more and understand it from the issue of state citizenship and belonging. So the rules remain the same. You can stop me at any moment of time. And if there is anything else to contribute, you can add on to it. These are the objective. We understand the concept of state, the concept state and the dynamics associated with it, comprehend various underpinnings of citizenship and discourse of belonging, and analyze case study of Tibetan diasporas. In fact, it's a very interesting thing. One of the articles, in fact, two articles talked about how the Tibetan diaspora in India is actually decreasing. It's the number of Tibetan refugees coming to India, dropped down drastically from 3,000 to about 100 in 2015 or less than that. And then there is this dual migration. So they coming to India and then migrating out from India towards the Western countries. There's a complex interrelationship between state citizenship and belonging, how the interplay happens and decides the life of certain groups or individuals related to diaspora. We've been continuously talking in this unit about the story of human being is a story of migration. Then we've been talking about how everything about a human being then basically boils down to an identity. And then, how when identity comes into play, there is identity politics, then there are state, the concept of state comes in, we have a concept of a nation state, and then, the pushing of the citizenship by the state, and then how does this impact people, is there is a complex relationship. Uh, let's start with belonging. It's a feeling of personal connection or bonding, and the best way to understand a state or nations or citizenship or belonging is to see it from individual concepts. Uh, it is the last unit in block 3, contemporary diaspora formation and emergent issues. Okay, I was still going by block 1, and nevertheless block 3. Okay, thanks for the correction. So when we look at our own state as an individual, let's say in a family, in an organization that we work in, or in a school that we study, or in an organization that we work in, etc., we look at a personal connection or a bonding to a particular culture, place, or group. Interlinkages of self-identity, interpersonal interaction, and a broader context. More often than not, you will hear the term, I don't belong here, or I don't feel a sense of belonging. We've heard that so many times, right from our early age. It's an emotional thing, it's a construct, it's a human emotion, need to affiliate with. Chased Hindi, in fact, a lot of Bihari Hindi, and in fact, his video had gone viral, where he was talking about the fact that how he came to India. My internet seems to be unstable. Are you able to hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just got a message, my internet. So this, and you can see this video on YouTube. About this South Korean boy whose father came to Patna, Bihar to work. And he did all his education in Patna. And, the fact is he's Korean. A lot of times he's mistaken for somebody from Tibet or from the Northeast. And yet, then he was talking about the fact that once in class 4, he brought in some Korean food, and some students in this class came and smelled the food and looked at the food and commented to him. And he says, and he adds and says, not in a very derogatory or a segregation kind of a form, but a random comment that this looks like earthworms. And he says from then on, one thing that he did was to bring in bread or roti and alus to have a sense of belonging in that class. So that sense of belonging becomes a very important thing to be able to affiliate with and being accepted by the members of a group. Need to belong to a peer group at school, accepted by co-workers, part of an athletic team. And it's a very strong emotional thing in human beings. In fact, humans do a lot to try and belong to a group, a place, or a culture. Defining a state is a sovereign community politically organized for the promotion of common ends and the satisfaction of common needs. Again, this is more abstract. We'll come to a little more detail in the next slide. Government represents the collective name for the agency, magistracy, or organization through which the will of the state is formulated. More often than not, a lot of times we interchangeably use the term state and nation, but these are the two definitions in terms of state and government. Introduction to political science. So there is this Peace of Westphalia. Westphalia is a place in Germany where a treaty was signed after a 30 years war, and this Treaty of Westphalia, or the Peace of Westphalia, as it says, a lot of scholars have said, oh, it's the start of nation state, or it. And a lot of them have said it's the origin of the principle crucial to modern international relations, collectively known as the Westphalian sovereignty. However, historians have argued against it. See, again, as I said, as we have already talked in multiple units, do understand that there are multiple points of view. Some points of view become more dominant, other point of view. However, the good part of academics is there is always, a point of discussion. There's a point of disagreement, and within this negotiation, something comes about. So Westphalia, or the Peace of Westphalia, is an important landmark, so to speak, in terms of state and how the state evolved. And we always hear about sovereignty implies the sole authority or the right to rule over the internal and external policies lies within a particular. In fact, the diaspora and migration studies is a great interdisciplinary field of history, of geography, of sociology, of political science, of anthropology, of media. One is when you look at it, one leads to another. It's actually an internet of ideas as to how things evolved, how things moved forward, how we are at this particular stage of our thinking. So the conceptual dimensions of the state implies that all four characteristics. So state is characterized by a permanent population, clearly defined territories, an institution of government, and sovereignty. And this also gives an international identity to the state. Remember, all states also are in terms of getting an identity. So, for example, if there is a state which is not recognized internationally, then that state, has a very fluid kind of an existence. So, for example, the Kurds talk about Kurdistan, but it is not a state in the real sense of the state. Nobody has, given it an international identity, or said that yes, it's a state. And it also means that every country considers territorial integrity inviolable and can lead to conflict. In fact, if you see, a lot of times the Ukraine-Russian conflict also has to do with identity. It has to do with territorial integrity. Russia claims that the Americans wooing Ukraine is basically trying to attack them. And then also somewhere down the line, it could also be that the erstwhile USSR had Ukraine as its part. So there is a complex interplay which happens. Each characteristics of state holds importance in understanding international relations, and dimension associated with citizenship and belonging. Again, as we go along, we'll get a little clarity on this. The state holds the sovereign authority to make and enforce rules and regulations binding for its citizens. So now we have a state, and with the state comes citizens. The discretionary power of the state determines who will enter its territory and who will get formal recognition. Now, this becomes interestingly ironical, considering the story of human being as the story of migration. And and that's why there is this conflict will still holds on between sovereignty and people wanting to migrate. Interplay between state and citizenship. Okay, so let's look at citizenship and its broader sense, belonging. So more often than not, citizenship is a legal, term, and a belonging is more a conceptual term. Having referred generally to the rights and obligations defining the relationship between individual and a. So again, as a political thought, So there is an interplay between citizenship and a state. It's the state which grants citizenship to people. Belonging is tricky to define and hard to measure. It's the product of stories we construct and the way we orient ourselves. So many times you would have seen in movies or heard it around that, there are people who say, for example, are working in the best of organizations, have a family, but they do not get a sense of belonging. In fact, a lot of conflicts, if we see today world over, conflicts within states, you can see you can identify as a sense of belonging. It involves interactions, both intimate and public, and the evolution of shared habits and perspectives. People might be citizens in a particular state, but may not have a belonging to that state. You could be a part of a family, but you may not feel a sense of belonging to a family. Unlike the rights of citizens, belonging cannot be forced, nor can it be legally denied or restricted to those who deserve it. So, belonging is a much more fluid concept. Citizenship is a much more formal concept. So, there is this author Wei Wang, a Chinese author, a Chinese person of Chinese origin, who moved from China to Canada to America, who says has got American citizenship, and she moved because first her father moved, then a family moved, and she moved. Has made many things easier for me and my family, but it does not equate to belonging. Nor does it mean that I feel American through and through. That is a challenge which is there for possibly the 21st century and beyond. How do states get a sense of belonging for people, for migrants, for refugees, for diasporas? How does it work out? There are multiple strategies to it, but at the same time, this becomes a very important question. So this is an article in the New Yorker, I think. You can check this out. In fact, when you read more of these stories, you get a sense of how people construct their identities, their belongings. And at this stage, it's good to bring in the concept of a nation and state. A lot of people, a lot of scholars use nation and state interchangeably. There is a difference. So while a nation is a group of people with a common language, history, culture, and usually a geographical territory, a state is an association of people characterized by formal institutions of government, including laws, a permanent territorial boundary, and sovereignty. A state may comprise one or more nations, as did the Roman Empire or the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and a nation may be represented by one or more contiguous states. So there is a difference. Unless you have a formal institution of government, including laws and a permanent territorial boundary, it is not characterized as a state. And it is also associated with sovereignty. And that's where the modern notion of digital diasporas, of internet, of free flow of information, of data, it becomes a challenge to the conventional states who till now have basically dictated laws. So, for example, if you look at data, how do you govern data which is free flowing? And that becomes a challenge for the modern world, modern states. And as I told you earlier, state also derives an identity in the international world, in the international forum, unless the international, set of people or the other states recognize a particular state, this particular state will not have an identity. And in doing that, abiding international law becomes a global norm. for responsible states. That's why when North Korea wants to stand out, everybody looks at it with, with trepidation, with what are they trying to do? They are trying to break the norm, and there are consequences to all this. It becomes the duty of a state to duly implement legally binding international treaties, because remember, if you do not, then your international standing goes down, to ensure its legitimacy at the global level. There is an individual level, there's an organization level, there is a state level, and there's a global level. There are hierarchies of these levels. India also follows international norms, signatory and party to many international treaties and covenants relating to migrants, refugees, and stateless persons. So we have, for example, ratified Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, Civil and Political Rights, Economic, Social, and Cultural. We still have not ratified the Refugee Treaty. And that is why we still treat refugees as foreign beings, as foreigners, as illegal, aliens. Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, Convention of the Rights of Child. And more often than not, once we have ratified, India has ratified these treaties, you are bound to follow these treaties. So let's look at citizenship and its underpinnings. Political science talked about, in political science, Aristotle, father of political science, did not support citizenship for everyone in ancient Greek states. Again, you need to understand context. When citizenship in the onset was being discussed, what was the context, what was the culture at that moment? So things change over the course of history. His considered views was to keep women, foreigners, and slave outside of citizenry domain, as they cannot actively. So he looked at the fact that the citizens need to actively participate in the work of the government. If in case a citizen is not able to actively participate, he or she shall not be a citizen. And that's why he felt women should not be given citizenship. They lack moral and intellectual capability to be a part of the popular assembly. So that was the context. He wanted to ensure full and equal participation from citizens in the governance, was a capacity to govern and be governed. So in fact, that is the reason a lot of times in today's discourse, we hear about the fact that you elect the government that you get, you have to be vigilant even after you have elected a government. This stems from early days. Similarly, various political thinkers have time and again theorized and conceptualized specific dimensions associated with citizenship. This is a work in progress. How do you define citizenship? And citizenship, if you see by the very nature, is an exclusionary concept. It's not an inclusive concept. You are basically excluding certain people out of the citizenship. Relationship between individuals and states. Citizens come under the inclusion category and are given political and civil rights. Now, that's where the conflict happens. So if we are talking about human rights, then the human rights come in direct conflict with citizenship, right? Because if we are talking about human rights and decide that every human has to have some rights, then how can a refugee or a migrant be denied the basic human rights? And one of the basic human rights is a sense of belonging and a sense of dignity, a sense of well-being. But citizenship talks about the fact that only citizens should get certain rights and the rest. And, the whole concept of illegal migrant itself becomes a contrary to the human rights scenario. But these are negotiations, and these are discourses and arguments which are going across states, across the world, across humankind's. Aliens fall under the exclusion category, do not hold political rights. They can be asked to leave the country anytime by a legal notice. Citizenship acquired through true practices, just soli and just sanguinens. Citizens determined by place of birth, soli or soil. Sanguines is citizens of parents irrespective of place of birth. So it is an inherited thing. Once the parent is a citizen, the child becomes the citizen of that place. So this we have seen that already. According to Turner, there are two crucial points to ponder. Citizenship, by its inherent nature, is an exclusionary right, as it divides the people between privileged member citizens and people who are bound to fall outside the privilege of membership. So, for example, when Britain talks about taking migrants and leaving them in Rwanda, it becomes a kind of, a very difficult thing to, argue or understand, because it was Britain who forced migrated lakhs and millions of people as indentured labor across the world. And now they are talking about that the migrants should not come to Britain. So you see how context changes the content of the political or the state rhetoric or the state formation of laws, and the way states understand things and people understand things. So I had this very interesting case in a classroom where I was talking about human rights. And when we were talking about human rights, one of the students, raised his hand and said, but these people have committed crime. So I answered, they might have committed a crime, which again has to be justified by the judiciary. But even if they have committed a crime, do they stop being a human being? And do they not have what we call as human rights? So how one understands these various concepts is very important. And there are obviously these negotiations and juxtapositions. Citizenship has an inheritance nature, usually gets inherited from parents, just like property rights. Advantage of citizenships are acquired arbitrarily whether one deserves it or not. So just because your parents are a citizen of a place, you inevitably become a citizen of that place. Thus remains a deeply contested topic in contemporary political discourse. So again, as I said, in academics, these are contestations which happen. Based on this contestation, something comes out. A lot of people may agree with the discourse or with the what comes out. Most people do not agree, but that's besides the point. Academics is the way to look at how knowledge evolves, how things change. These then form the basis of how society and the state treats or understand things. More complicated when no country wants to claim, recognize, or receive certain persons or group of persons for various reasons. Such persons are usually categorized as homeless or stateless. Snowden suddenly became stateless and homeless. And it's not just Snowden. Today, the next challenge will be the climate migration. With climate changes happening and climate migration on the anvil, how are states going to deal with this forced migration? Something which is under nobody's control. So there is this very interesting movie, Hollywood movie, which is called, I think, The Day After Tomorrow, where the climate change gets in this chill and the Americans have to, go south, and the American state then gets formed in Mexico. So it's a very interesting concept. I thought it was a very interesting concept how they had thought of that idea and executed that movie. It's a very interesting movie. And with diaspora, it becomes all the more complicated. Issues associated with place and belonging. The traditional citizenship approach conceives that the people have attachment towards a certain place due to emotional ties. Now, diasporas is complex because attachment to multiple places. And that is somewhere, initially it always was a wonder that all these Indians who went and settled in America, the second generation or the third generation, coming back to India to get married, or trying to have a say in the Indian politics or the Indian way of things. It is because of a sense of belonging. So they might have got a citizenship of America, they might have stayed out there. There is certainly still a sense of belonging in the home country. There's a belonging in the host country. They want to belong to that society out there, but at the same time, they have an attachment to the home country. For diaspora people, becoming active citizens, attaining participation possibilities in a countries of residence, and relevant to engagement and adaptation to a specific territory. So it becomes that much more, for diasporas, it becomes that much more difficult to, how to negotiate this concept of place of residence and this multiple belongings. Are often simultaneously part of two or more community societies. Their efforts are not just limited to shaping a new life in new surroundings. Dual challenge of gaining a recognized social position in new social structure and retaining the previous positions. And that becomes a complex challenge. In fact, that is the same challenge which people would be facing when they move from one state of India to another state for jobs, for livelihoods, or for better opportunities. So it becomes a very, and if you see, there is major internal migration which is happening in terms of economic opportunities, how the sense of belonging has to be brought in by the various Indian states, how multiple states of the world have to get that sense of belonging, how to negotiate between the place of residence and from the place from where you come from. So discourses of belonging, belonging is an abstract concept. It forms a crucial part of the identity of a person. It's extremely complex in terms of how identity. I was seeing this video in which there was a person whose designation was an identity architect. So there are multiple people who help other people, negotiate identities. Belonging is an alienable part of happiness for an individual or group to feel worthy and capable of productively contributing to the nation's development. So in the absence of a feeling of belonging, more often than not, citizens or aliens or migrants or whatever designation you give will not be able to contribute in terms of economically or otherwise. Citizenship is looked at as legal recognition of political belonging. So again, citizenship is legal, belonging is much more abstract. Belonging encapsulates gendered, spatial, relational, technological, age-related, cultural dimension. So very interestingly, the new age of digital actually has reduced belonging of, let's say, disadvantaged, marginalized, and older group to various services of the state. So, for example, when people say digital has increased inclusiveness, actually digital is more exclusive than inclusive. For example, disabled, challenged people, older people are finding it much more difficult with the digital technology than what they had with the analog technology. So one has to look at it in different ways. So there are multiple aspects on belonging. There are 6 significant factors related to place belonging. Antonicic, 2010, autobiographical experiences relating to one past. A human being is pretty complex that way. So, experiencing relating to one's past, relational, personal, and social ties that contribute to enriching one person's life, culture, language, food habits, religiosity, essential role. And then there is economic, financial, and social safety of an individual. So, in spite of the fact, you might say that, oh, these governments are offering dole. In the Western society there is a concept of a dole. That is just one factor. There are other factors which will create a sense of belonging or not a sense of belonging. Legal security of individuals, including citizenship and residency permits, length of residence, pull factors like quality of life, material or intellect. In fact, a lot of Tibetan refugees are moving from India to the West because of lack of economic opportunities, because of other financial and social safety. They are not able to get jobs. So we will see as we go along about the Tibetan refugees. And also we need to understand the claim of immigrants for achieving political belonging entails arguments. So there might be a lot of arguments. For example, in India, there is a lot of arguments which I hear regarding immigrants, regarding how immigrants are, in fact, we had looked at the fact how the Assam agitation was brought in or came about against the immigrants, and they felt threatened with these Bangladeshi immigrants going to take their jobs or going to take their economic activity. But there are claims of immigrants for achieving political belonging. These arguments, for example, economic, immigrants contribute a lot to the host land in terms of economic advancement and are crucial. Understand one thing, in spite of the fact that whenever a person is in at any place, home or host or any place, he or she will be involving themselves in some activity, because at the end of the day, you need to eat. For putting food on the table, you would need to do some activity, and that would be an economic activity. All of us involve in some economic activity. So immigrants contribute to the host land in terms of economic advancement, crucial and inalienable part of the country's economy. Social, immigrants participate in everyday social exchanges, create a social fabric. Diversity component becomes very important. Diversity helps people understand things in much more much wider way. And then, of course, there is the universal in terms of human rights. Irrespective of nationality, immigrants also claim citizenship as a part of the global economy. This is Antonicic, who has quoted this. These are particular arguments. Some people may agree, some may disagree. At the end of the day, these are the arguments for something called a universal citizenship. In spite of a citizenship, asylum seekers will feel accepted and recognized, as we saw from the Chinese authors, in New Yorker story. In spite of the fact that she's an American citizen, she does not feel a sense of belonging. In fact, in the earlier units, we looked at the fact that how the Chinese Indians who had stayed in India for a considerable period of time, when they went back to China, felt aliens in China because they had been very well integrated in the Indian scheme of things. The host society also needs to accept, acknowledge, and appreciate the inclusion of people, because at the end of the day, unless the host accepts acknowledges and appreciates these people, these migrants will never get a sense of belonging. I belong here remains first and foremost a personal, intimate feeling of being at home in a place working of power. And obviously there's a working of power relation. If we again go back into a basic reductionist example that we talked about, where the conventional marriage has a girl traveling uh, to her husband's household, a lot of times how that power relationship works will result in a sense of belonging or not a sense of belonging. Both the individual, and there is an individualistic context and a social context. So possibly the socially, there might be a feeling of a sense of belonging, and individual might still can remain left out. However, one has to look at both this context and deeper nuances associated with belonging. Three vital elements of self-identity, interpersonal relation, and the broader context play a crucial role in understanding the vitality of belonging. So belonging itself is a very complex word. I hope I'm not going too fast with this. Guys, I hope I'm not going too fast.
Yeah, so I can say for myself, I don't feel so.
Okay, perfect. At any moment of time, as I said, anyone can stop me. Integration and belonging. Homeless people face a tremendous amount of suffering, including disenfranchisement, social death. More often than not, there is this constant struggle of each individual to get a sense of belonging. That belonging also is in terms of a recognition. You might hear a lot of people say, I am not being recognized in the society, I'm not recognized in my organization, I'm not recognized. That is a sense of belonging. Legal instruments of state and various conceptions of citizenship must strive to ensure the belonging of diasporic community and refugees, as they've been contributing to society in numerous ways. And these are some things, these discourses, these discussions are very important, because say for example, a very simple thing, if you look at a lot of news items comes about racism being practiced in let's say Delhi or other places with respect to people from Northeast or people from South, is because of the fact that a large majority of citizens are not able, or have neither been exposed to or they have been exposed to multiculturalism, but they have not actually engaged with multiculturalism. And because of a lack of talk in, let's say, mainstream media about multiculturalism, about all kinds of things and how they contribute, do people have very narrow views on how things work. So for example, when I hear an argument there are very few taxpayers, actually everybody who involves themselves with an economic activity pays tax. So it's a very narrow view of understanding a particular topic, and it's bound to happen because there are not enough discourses and discussions happening on that. And that's where academics comes in. The term integration can be considered better than assimilation, as integration is a mutual process rather than assimilation, which is a one-way process. And that is the reason why the Indian constitutional makers and the way the Indian state, as it came about, the new Indian state, looked at all these things. In fact, when the state initially came about, this thing about integration and assimilation was much talked about, and finally the Indian state felt that integration was a much better concept, then what possibly the US follows? US as a state follows the assimilation policy. They want everybody to have an American culture kind of view. The Indian state is much more integrating than the American state. There are economic incentives of integration and belonging. Legrand, there are 7 dividends. He brought out 7 dividends. There's a 4D dividend. Many refugees do dirty, difficult, dangerous, and dull jobs that are not readily taken by a whole society. And if you look around, you will see a lot of rag pickers, a lot of people who do garbage cleaning happen to be refugees and migrants.
Especially from Bangladesh and the Bengali ones.
Without taking names, rather than taking names, you're absolutely right. These are dirty, difficult, dangerous, and dull jobs. And it's not just in India, it's across the world. You will see a lot of Indian janitors in European airports. So, there are economic incentives of integration and belonging. There is a deafness dividends, highly skilled refugees. I was just reading Canada has just opened itself in terms of migration for highly technical people. I'm also reading about the fact that the Indian state is trying, or the Indian government is trying to start chip manufacturing. Why are we not looking at migrants and refugees? I'm sure there will be a lot of migrants and refugees. Somewhere along the line, it's a thought process which needs to be explored. So economic incentives of integration, debt dividend. Several studies show that over time, refugees can become net contributors to public finance, not in short term, but in long term. Demographic dividends. Refugees normally are younger people and can have built a younger and adaptable workforce. So these are the 4. The next 3 are development dividend. Refugees can contribute to their own development. So look at the fact that in case these refugees are able to contribute to their families back home, and the families back home are able to prosper, then obviously there's a chance that these migrants might go back. India gets a lot of remittances out of migration to the Gulf, to various places. There's a dynamism dividend. There are numerous examples of enterprising refugees who have started new businesses, make an economy more dynamic and adaptable. Tibetans, in terms of handicrafts, in terms of Tibetan food. There's a diversity dividend. Diversity also gives a lot of dividend. In fact, gender and diversity studies today worldwide are incorporated in various academic places, in universities, in organizations. They are pushing diversity, gender and diversity, because this, it has been shown that gender and diversity give dividends. Refugees can bring new ideas and form of innovations outside what is really routinely thought and imagined within the receiving society. Indians have done phenomenally well in the American society, if you see. So the American society or the American state is reaping major dividends out of the Indian migrants, or the Indian NRIs, as we call them. And sorry.
So there is no such policy for returning migrant workers to make them rehabilitation and reintegrate with these government schemes, and according to their skill sets. There's no chance to them. That's why they are remigrating to Gulf nations.
True. That's because, again, possibly one of the factors is that there is not enough mainstream discussion on these issues. So it does not become a political heft for it to be pushed as a policy.
Yeah, even the political parties also not aware about this issue. Returning migrants, international, especially international returning migrants.
So see, remember
about within the country migrants only. Many times in Parliament also. Recently, K.R. Suresh Reddy, TRS, he pointed out what about the any welfare board for the returning migrants? He raised the question in
Huh.
Parliament question hour, but the government MEA answered that there is no idea about this. There is no uh, advice. There is no such a plan for this returning migrants. They
Huh.
said.
True, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So, in integration and belonging, political parties play a very important role. And then again, because of a diverse and a big country like India, there are so many issues. Who is going to be looking at this issue, or who is going to be looking at that issue? That's where some amount of political posturing, pushing the politics or the political parties to take up a particular issue, lobbying. The concept of lobbying is now becoming more important in the country. For example, in the West and other places, it is recognized as a legitimate process. So there are so many issues, and you're right. If you are looking at this, if at any problem that one looks at, for example, the Indian state looks at, there are so many solutions, and unless all these solutions are brought to the table and talked about, how would we know that a particular solution looked at by a particular bureaucrat in a particular ministry is the best solution? Was that Swadesh who was saying that?
Yeah, sir, it is a Gulf base in
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
the temporary migration. That's why the NRIs, you're saying the two parts. If they go US, UK, Canada, they're doing settle. They're thinking to settle there only. But in Gulf region, they will come back after 10 years, 20 years. What are they have work and contract?
And then you're saying in the absence of any rehabilitation, they go back.
Yeah.
I can totally understand.
Yeah, the white collar jobbers also, they can easily they can search a job in India and they will settle, or they're doing some other businesses also. But these people, they cannot do much better reintegrate.
Because they've stayed for such a long time outside.
Yes, sir.
Understand.
They're disconnected mentally, physically, socially, politically also, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And in all these, media plays a very important role. When media imposes specific identities to certain sections, lead to exclusion. Asylum seekers or refugees, due to their exclusion from society, compelling them to question their belonging in the host land or homeland. So, political parties and media play a very important role in the whole process. We are short on time. Let's move it. Okay. Integration. India is known for well-appreciated ancient legacy of Vasudev Kutumbakam. World is one family, followed a distinct salad ball, which what we typically talked about. Integration celebrates diversity. The founding fathers of the country looked at integration, and in fact that is still continuing, though there are all kinds of blips which come into the being. It's a unique model for previous, and in fact we always have seen research wise or otherwise that diversity does bring advantages. There is a chat. COVID is exposed how various Indian state takes. Yes, of course. Ranjit, COVID was in fact a bad phase and a good phase for some, but the lot of stories which came out were typically in a particular bad way. Again, somewhere down the line, there are so many complex. India is a very complex and a diverse and a big nation, and works very well at a decentralized level rather than a centralized level. India's model contrasts and US is the melting pot model. In fact, the melting pot model, wants everybody to go into the US kind of state. immigrants to assimilate into the host country's culture, to become a part of the common American culture, which leads to multiple pressures which we are seeing. For example, what we saw in France is also a sort of pressure between a sense of citizenship and belonging, when that teenager was shot dead by the police and riots came about. Let's quickly look at the Tibetan diasporas. In fact, I have shared three news items from 17, 19, and 21, where it's very clear that Tibetans, more and more, less and less Tibetans are today coming to India, and more Tibetans who were in India are migrating to the West. So Tibetans work under the Central Tibetan Refugee Committee under the leadership of the Holiness Dalai Lama. They have been assigned registration certificates by the Indian government to facilitate. Population have been declining, we know that. Difficulties faced by Tibetans in finding job is also one of the reasons behind Tibetan migration. Educated but unemployed Tibetan youth, statelessness makes it difficult to find desired jobs, difficulties in traveling abroad. So in fact, one of the stories is about how these Tibetans went to the court and got a passport, because they said, we need an Indian passport. Otherwise, every time you go out and you come back, you need to get a documentation. And most people at the lower level do not understand this documentation. Procuring an identity certificate is long and cumbersome. Supposed to apply and acquire a permit for leaving the country, immigration officials unaware, and they face problems. That's why a lot of get jobs, they can get an Aadhaar card. Sridhar, here, see again, because of this comes under the identity politics. The identity politics are because of various reasons, and if you notice, these are negotiations which are happening. And interestingly, we have also seen historically the melting pot may not work in such a diverse society like India, in spite of whatever you try and do. See, at the end of the day, one of the reasons why we have survived all these in fact, the Indian civilization, one of the old days, has survived all these multitude historical upheavals of various raiders, invaders, diasporas, migrant groups, is because of our integration approach. And more often than not, you will also see the fact that whenever there is a crisis which comes, we go back to our cultural moorings of integration. We keep talking about integration. So we need to understand how this works out. That's what I keep saying. The good part of academics is that you are able to take 3 steps back and look at how things are, rather than get into the middle of things and then get swayed by various emotions and information which comes our way. So Tibetans now can get land allocation. They are cooperative societies because of these rehabilitations. There was a news story in Himal magazine from Tibetans in North America maintaining links to homeland presents a unique challenge. Invest without institution. So India has that institutional framework of that experience of Tibetness, whereas the West being a melting pot. So the Tibetans, the young Tibetans who are now going into the West, are going through this major, fight within. Once they take up an American citizenship or a European citizenship, do they still remain Tibetans? Some of them have felt that they can then push the Tibetan cause much better once they are American citizens. But it is not easy, because now, the sense of belongingness, the sense of citizenship, Americans want you to be assimilating their culture. And then inevitably you realize as the generations pass, the culture gets eroded. The community must craft its own solution to express and nurture what it means to be Tibetan. This story is in Hemal magazine. If you, it's available on the net. You can read it. Summing up, conceptual idea of state with its 4 characteristics focus on crucial dimensions of citizenship. Citizenship, as we said, is an exclusionary concept. It excludes certain people, includes certain people, aspects of belonging. With state and citizenship, concept of integration, linking them to both salad bowl and melting pot. And we read a little bit about Tibetan diaspora. The 4 new stories will get you a further understanding of the Tibetan diaspora. And there are some references: J. Ahmed, Tibetan Diasporas, Antonicic, Amila, and Arnold, Homelessness, Citizenship, and Identity. Okay, any questions?
So I wanted to share, so I come from a literature background.
Okay.
So while we were reading diasporic literature, so we used to come across these um, some of the concepts that we talked of back then were the idea of an imaginary homeland
Hmm.
by Salman Rushdie,
Correct.
and Homi Bhabha's idea of liminality.
Hmm.
And so I was just wondering if when I'm since right now it's a paper which is kind of, it's a question which is more sort of has to do with the, I think, the discipline right now, as like, if I'm looking at this, are there any strict boundaries where, so I cannot refer to those authors and their research, and I mean, can I use those terms as well?
Yes, of course. Listen, at the end of the day, literature is a great pointer to history. It's a great pointer to geography. It's a great pointer to a lot of things. Somewhere down the line, we still do not look at literature as it is. So I recently wrote a paper with a colleague of mine who is a professor in English literature, and we talked about what does the literature talk about pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So literature gives you a great set of pointers. Remember, media, when we even look at movies, we get a sense of, we get a sense of context. So literature is a great source.
Okay, sir. Yeah, that's what I wanted to know.
What about Pakistan women landing up in Haryana recently, Ranji?
Yeah, Professor, there was a report that a Pakistani lady, by using social media, how she had landed up in Haryana now.
Okay,
Recently.
I missed out that out.
Can I say something about that? I also read that.
Tell me.
So it was a Pakistani woman had fallen in love with an Indian man, and she was a married woman with her 3 children. She came here to India through via Nepal,
Okay.
because these 2 people met first in Nepal, the Indian
Okay.
man and the Pakistani women.
Okay.
And after meeting once in Nepal, since she couldn't directly come from Pakistan to India, I think she perhaps came uh, to India with her 3 children and started living with this man.
Okay.
But I think her visa expired, and then she was being looked after, being searched for, and she ran away with that man. But then she was later caught by the police. That was the
Okay.
whole
I
story.
did read a story about this Pakistani woman married to this guy, and they were living in Bangalore, and how the police was able to get to her via WhatsApp calls to Pakistan. So I didn't come across this Haryana story. So I now will look about this story. So Ranjit, again, this is, so it's a very interesting thing about in terms of humanness, the emotional bonds, and then we have states, and then we have boundaries, and then after all, human being is an emotional animal. And then there are all these concepts, and as I said, today things are becoming all the more interesting in terms of the negotiation between migration, between citizenship, between the state wanting to put his will. and then looking at everything from a security lens. So world over now, a lot of things are looked at from a security lens, which again is an antithesis to the whole concept of humankind evolving from Africa and moving across the world. So it's a very interesting thing. These negotiations are happening. And, inevitably, unless the media, the politics of a nation and everything else keeps upgrading themselves, more and more conflicts are bound to happen, because the sense of belonging, movement, uh, as I said, climate change is going to be the next big thing. How is the world going to deal with it? I'm sure they will find out some solutions.
Hi, sir.
Hi, Veera.
This is today's from today's class. The sense of belongingness. From the sense of belongingness is purely personal thing, sir. Through that, we will not get any any protection rights or protection instruments from the state.
Correct.
So only citizenship. Through the citizenship only we will get whatever the protections or legal rights, whatever rights.
Correct.
But I don't know which is that means belongingness will create more harm to the host country. Is it correct, sir?
See, in fact, again, let me reduce it to that marriage example that I keep giving. So there is a girl in the, and again, as I'm not using it as a general paintbrush, but a specific case where there is a traditional, wedding where the girl gets married and walks across to the boy's family in marriage. So now she has a legal right of a daughter-in-law for the parents and a wife to the boy, and she's staying in the house. And now she has she's supposed to and this is an arranged marriage, and now she's supposed to call these parents mama papa, in sense have a sense of belonging to the husband's family. And she has stayed all her life for whatever 20 odd years with her parents, where there is a sense of belonging. Now, unless this husband's family, the husband and the husband's family, they have given her a legal right. Unless they make her comfortable in that family in sense of belonging, and they always treat her with suspicion that she's an outsider, she will never be able to contribute in that host family, and she will always be looked as an outsider from the home. Veera?
Yes, sir. But
So,
but God came
sorry.
from same culture.
Sorry?
That woman, that girl, came from same culture, right?
Correct.
Come to the husband.
Correct.
Because if she came another culture, she came outside of the boundary.
Correct.
How her behavior is a little bit of different, right?
Veera, the interesting part is, irrespective of the fact that I might be from the same culture. Say, for example, I am living in Delhi. More often than not, Delhi has a pretty uniform culture. However, Delhi again is multicultural, with multiple people from various parts of the country and Afghanistan and Bangladesh and Nepal staying out here. If you go to various localities, you will see various cultures coming in. So in spite of possibly the same caste or the same religion or the same subcaste, there would be differences of culture. And then basically, besides the culture, remember, now there is a different family. And then there is a politics which plays out there. Remember, between a husband and wife also, to be able to understand common goals, there has to be some politics, assuming the fact that both are equally qualified and both are equally economically independent. Veera?
Yes, yes.
So belonging also works on an individual level, but also works on a society level. So when you have migrants moving into a different country, how are the migrants looked at? Say, for example, the discourse which we, which media and a set of political parties talked about the Bangladeshi migrants was not very, see, it worked well within the political realm, but if you look out from a human realm, some of those comments were uncalled for. Veera?
Yes. Mhm.
So you see, it works in a multiple ways, and inevitably, academically, it has shown
Yeah, yeah.
that when you have migrants do contribute to a host country in various ways.
Mm. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any other question?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Sadanand, are you there? Should we, you have anything, or should we call it a day? I think he's not there. So let's call it a day. Have a nice evening and have a nice weekend.
Yes, Abha.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. So have a nice weekend and see you whenever we next meet. Bye-bye.